Hello, everybody, and welcome to this month's edition of the Lowell Lodestars Drilling Deeper webinar. This month, we've got a great friend of mine and of the fund, Michael Hudson. A real coup to get Mike on the line to dish the dirt on how he's done it with one of his latest ventures, Southern Cross Gold. Good morning, Mike, or good day, Mike, I should say.
G'day, John. Lovely to be here. What an honour amongst the esteemed people you've had on this segment already. So very happy to be here, mate.
Oh, no, thank you very much. We're really looking forward to the discussion today. We'll get straight into the first section. We're going to do a little bit of market commentary first, and we're very lucky to have Mike Hudson here to talk about the differences in the Aussie market and the Canadian market, focused on junior resources, and the pluses and minuses, and in particular the differences in valuation between those. And obviously Mike's company, Southern Cross Gold, is listed on both ASX and now the TSX. So it'll be great to get his insights on that. Then we'll go into some background from Mike on his illustrious and highly varied career in exploration across the globe, and get some insights into the learnings that he's had over his career into how to make big mineral discoveries. After that, we'll have hopefully be able to get to all the Q&A, and then we'll have a wrap up. So what we're going to talk about today, just for a few minutes, is the differences between the ASX junior resources market and the TSX in particular. The TSX Venture Exchange is the main one for junior explorers in North America. And really what we've seen over a number of years has been an underperformance of the TSX Venture Exchange versus the ASX resources sector. And that has driven quite a bit of interest from Canadian listed companies to come and look at a dual listing or just a swap from the TSXV to the ASX, which is not an insignificant thing to do, obviously. And that is largely driven by valuations. I've got my own theories as to why the ASX has performed better in general than the TSXV. I think one of them may be related to the different markets in terms of there are a lot more alternative investment opportunities in North America. So while the capital pool is, of course, much bigger in North America than in Australia, there's a lot more to choose from. And in particular, things like AI, the opportunities to invest in that in North America are much greater than, say, here in Australia. But there are quite a few other differences as well on the pluses and minuses. Generally, the Canadians are much more careful with issuing stock. It's not uncommon for an Aussie company to have a billion or more shares outstanding, whereas you say that to a Canadian, they're just absolutely horrified. I think North American execs, and I'm interested to hear your view on this, Mike, generally get paid less, but they may have more than one hat. So yeah, look, interesting differences. And what we've seen, well, here's a slide which does show, this is just 2025. This is the TSX Venture Exchange Metals and Mining Index. And we have seen a recovery in that index from a very low base, but it's up over 40% in the first 6 months of this year. So, from a really decimated position, we have seen some recovery. But there have been quite a few companies that have come from the TSX V or TSX to the ASX. I've listed a few there. There's quite a few copper companies amongst them. I think part of the reason for that is that the ASX copper space has been to some extent hollowed out by it hasn't been a big number of companies in advanced copper plays on the ASX for quite some time, but there's been a number of takeovers of late, such as Xanadu Mining, New World Resources, etc. So we have seen a few copper companies migrate, or I should say dual list from the TSX to the ASX. But of course, there's been a few that have gone the other way: Mithril, Omega, and Mike, Southern Cross Gold just in the last week or two has migrated and been promoted to the TSX from the TSXV. So Mike, over to you. Any thoughts on the different markets and how you perceive them?
Yeah, how long have we got, John? I should say, despite this accent, I've spent 25 years in the Canadian and North American markets, and Southern Cross, which is there, is my first Australian ASX deal. So I've been on an aeroplane from Melbourne across the Pacific for far too long. The there's pros and cons for both. I mean, I remember back in the noughties, everyone was going across to Canada for all the reasons, a lot of the reasons that you spoke to, much bigger pools of capital, much bigger risk taking. We're very, very conservative here, and our capital's very conservative. So the way that we build projects here is to build them, put resources, try and get into mining quicker. Whereas in a general sense, North Americans are going, how big can this be? How big can we make this? And so as a consequence, Canadians build bigger projects from a capex point of view, so they'll put in shafts, whereas Aussies will put down declines on smaller resources. As a general rule, and as a consequence, the Canadian market is better pre-development, and the Aussie market is better for miners, I think, overall. The Aussie market, the biggest difference for me is the transparency. So we can see who buys and sells our shares from just the regulatory point of view. And if somebody's selling, we can say, hey, you've got some shares, more shares. Would you like us to find a buyer for those? So we can actually work with shareholders to keep shares off the market, so you don't find those opportunities where people are saying, I'm not selling, and your share price is going down. So you can manage your register much better. And likewise, if somebody's buying, you call them up and welcome them. So it's a much better relationship with shareholders, whereas Canada, through the North American rules, you can't have any transparency. So Canada's full of smiling assassins. We're not selling, and it leads to, and as a consequence, that leads to what you talked to, which is the structure of companies. Actually, it doesn't matter if you've got 100 shares out or a billion, as long as you understand the register, which is the key point around register management, at least, then Canadians can only roll a stock back and know who's in that rollback stock, and then progressively you lose control of understanding your register. That being said, it's all around, and we'll talk about this, per share metrics. Per share metrics is everything in this game, and I've learned that as I've gone through and made the mistake of not thinking about that for a lot of my career. So it does matter. Dilution will get you in the end, either way, transparency. And yeah, there's many other things that get that. Well, I suppose one other is that Canadians lost their way, with smoking the weed literally on their
Yes.
share market, or hallucinogens or crypto, whereas we do our knitting. So that's where the changes come. The TSX has 5 times the amount of capital, though, because of that doorstep of North America. So it's I've been in a room over the last months with private capital that is a room of less than 100 people. It was $1 trillion in that room. Now that doesn't happen in Australia, right? That pool of capital is just not there. So it's and I remember Robert Friedland once saying 1% of the world's capital is directed towards mining. I'm going after the other 99%. So it just gives you more opportunities, I suppose, in a bigger pool. So you can't ignore it. So I think if you can get both listings, and it's very hard to get both listings right in terms of management and being known. Some of those companies have come across here on the back of Capstone, and it's very hard for them to get liquidity without teams here, or they're being known. We've known each other for a long time, so I'm going to manage your capital as well as possible. Whereas if I didn't know you, I've got to demonstrate myself over time before you're going to take a punt on me and the company that I'm running. So it's not simple to do it both ways. You've got to have a very good partner, basically, as in the person you married.
Yeah, indeed. And look, interesting. You mentioned flying, across the Pacific probably more times than you can remember. But that was one of the things, a silver lining to COVID, if I guess, brought you back home, and to a project very close to home for you, a real benefit, and hopefully you're not having to spend quite as much time on a plane anymore. But I think we'll get into that. I'll just finish this set of slides, and then we'll jump into talking a bit more about Southern Cross and Mike's career. But before I forget, the Lowell Resources Fund is having a mid-year investor briefing. Mike will be presenting at that investor briefing with 3 other companies, and that's at 5 p.m. for people in Melbourne. That's 5 p.m. on the 29th of July. So please go to the LRFM website if you'd like to register for that. There'll be drinks and canapes complimentary, but numbers are limited, so please get onto that if you haven't. So look, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. I'm going to pass over to Mike Hudson to hopefully pass on to us, and I'm sure he will, some absolute pearls of wisdom about his career and what he's learnt over the last 30 odd years.